Hello everyone.
Hello.
Welcome back to Temples in Training. My name is Christine.
And I'm Kyle.
And we are on a journey of spiritual and physical fitness.
That's right.
Today we will be diving into our spiritual journey and having our very first Bible study on the New Testament chronologically. Today we'll be going a little bit over Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I believe that is all.
That's right. So let's jump right in.
Yes. Okay, so for each of our little devotional times that we have together, what I first like to do is go over questions that we may have gathered throughout our reading. It's really good if you have one of these journaling Bibles that have a big margin so that you can write down questions, things that you're curious about, maybe things that you didn't realize before. For this reading in particular, since it's our first one, I have not received any questions yet. But don't be afraid to write it down in the comments even if we've moved on. I didn't have any questions in this one particularly because it has been stuff that I've read over a lot. I don't know if you had any.
Not to speak of.
Okay, so we will just skip right on to the next section, and that will be talking about some themes and just messages that we got for the characters of this time. And before we jump into major themes, I just wanted to go over some events that we saw happen through these 3 days of reading. And so in the very beginning, it is talking about the birth of John foretold. So it speaks about the angel coming to Zechariah and him being told that he's going to be having a son, which was amazing because that was a miracle during that time. They weren't supposed to be able to have children. And we see that because of his lack of faith, he was silenced until John was born. Then it goes into the birth of Jesus foretold, and Mary was the opposite of it. She actually believed and she was very excited about this, obviously nervous as well. But then it talks about the word becoming flesh, and just because that's something that you had started, if you want to just talk about that, I know that was something you were interested in.
So yeah, when we read in the scripture, John chapter 1 verses 1 through 14, it talks about in the beginning, you know, the word became flesh, and that's like in the beginning everything was made with him. And it talks about not just God in that sense, but also Jesus being a part of every bit ever since the beginning of creation, which is a really big revelation to a lot of people. They don't realize that Jesus didn't start in the womb of Mary. No, he was a part of the story all along, and that's what in that very small 14 verse section, that's what it talks about. And that's a really amazing thing because that's where the Word of God became the flesh. You know, and that's like such a big revolutionary thing that a lot of people just glance over and just read right past it and don't really take the words for the weight that they really hold.
Yeah, what a great way to look at that. That's awesome. So right after that, it went into the very dense genealogy, but it's very important because it's good to know where everything came from. And then we read about Joseph accepting Jesus as his son, which was really big, the birth of Jesus, and then Jesus presented in the temple, which I know is another thing that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so this is a big thing that a lot of people, at least in like the religious realm, look at presenting a child to the church and what that all foretells. And a lot of people don't realize that Jesus was actually presented in front of the church for a very specific reason. It was in the sense of raising this child in the ways of the Lord. Doing the part of the parent of a child is a treasure, right? And it's a gift from God. You know, like you didn't go out there and pick your child like you do when you go and pick your food or something like that. No, God handpicked this child just for you for a special reason because he knows that you as a parent, you know, have the specific qualities, and he knows that you can take good care of this child. And so they present it to God almost like as a form of devotion, saying, dedication, exactly. I will dedicate my child because you have blessed me with this child. I now dedicate him back to you, Lord, and raise him up in your teachings. So that's a big thing that I love. Whenever I see, you know, newborns, I think back about this verse when I see them, and it's a really beautiful verse. And to think that Jesus himself was an example set before all of us, and it's recorded in scripture. It's amazing to read that.
Yeah, that's very cool. Really, really cool. And that's, I think, a similar way of why we do that now is to do the same thing as why we have dedications for our children.
Exactly.
That's very good. so after that, we read about the Magi visiting and escape to Egypt. You know, you guys are more than welcome to go on to our full readings. That part is just talking about how Magi went to Herod and they knew that Jesus needed to escape so that he wasn't killed. And then we start reading about one of my favorite parts of this reading. And I don't know why it hasn't been until now that I really kind of absorbed what it was talking about here, but very little do you hear about, like you hear about Jesus when he was born, a little bit about when they talked about he was 2 years old, right around the time that the Magi visited, but very little. But it was really cool to hear about like preteen Jesus. You don't hear about his younger life very often. You just hear mostly about his ministry. But they talked about when they went to the festival, right? Where did we find that exactly?
I was in Luke chapter 2, towards the end of the verse, towards the end of the chapter. It talks about when Jesus was 12 years old. His family had brought him to the yearly Passover, kind of like a festival out there in Jerusalem that they had.
Right, yeah, so it says, every year Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover, and when he was 12, they went up to the festival according to the custom. But after the festival, they're all heading home, and you can imagine all family and cousins and friends. It was probably like a really big trip. You know what it kind of reminds me of? Home Alone a little bit. You know, there's so many people, they're traveling on this big trip. They don't even realize somebody's missing, and who is that somebody? That was Jesus.
That was Jesus.
And so I can just picture a 12-year-old Jesus
left behind.
Right. But knowing what his calling is, and he's just so focused. He's not thinking, okay, here's the next step. This is what my family's doing. This is what is custom. This is what everyone else is doing. You know where he was? In his Father's home. Because that's what he was being called to at that time. So he had actually said, why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house? And I can just picture, you know, young Jesus, 12-year-old boy Jesus, just this being a very absorbent, just sitting, asking questions because he was in the temple, and everyone was so surprised about first of all, the type of question he was asking and the answers that he had for them as well, and his knowledge. And it just makes me think, you know, we throw around the verses of, you know, don't look at a child because they're young, look down on a child. Or inexperienced. Right, or something like that. Or you often hear people say, oh, well, they're young, they can get to that when they're older. Or even children just saying, you know, I'm not an adult yet, I don't have time for that right now. But Jesus was just 12 years old when he was already following and listening to that call of God. And I just, you know, I think that age is such a young, spry, like, excited age where you can just be really happy and ready to learn things, and you just want to do things and completely wrap your mind around whatever you're passionate about. And he was just passionate about the will of God and what God wanted from him. So, you know, I just think of that and think of, you know, we can all put ourselves into that position of, we can follow along with the customs and do whatever, you know, we're supposed to be doing, but it's also really important to do what God is calling us to do.
That's right.
And I just thought that was really cool to see that refreshing, light spirit. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but just, that's all I got.
Motivating, the motivating spirit of his.
Right, so anyway, that was really cool.
Spunky.
Yeah, but that I really enjoyed reading, and I think that's kind of the end of the events that we had. So just looking back at it, what do you think some of the messages that were presented?
Some of the call to actions. It's a little hard because it's so much information packed into it. It's but what's really cool is seeing the way angels are used in like notifying people. You know, a lot of people, they close off that image. That's a form of communication. You know, back then people didn't have the constant Holy Spirit within them to sense what the Lord is speaking to them. Instead, angels needed to be used, right? Unlike today, because of Jesus, we now have the Holy Spirit. We know exactly, we can communicate directly, you know? But back then, we see Gabriel talking to Mary. We see an angel showing to Zechariah. And we also see angels visiting Joseph and Mary when they fled from King Herod's decrees, you know? Like, constantly we see that, and we realize how ordained this word becoming flesh, the prophecies being fulfilled, and how God aligned it to be so. That all this took place so that it can happen. And it just goes to show the amazing plan that God has and how it falls perfectly into place, because He knows exactly what steps to lay the path. And if He has people who are willing to follow it, that it just opens the door and it opens your eyes. And onto us, we probably read, I don't know, like 12 years of information within 3 days.
Yeah.
12 years of information in 3 days. And we, like, you know, when 12 years passes, you're like in the middle of it, like, I don't see the end. But when you take a step back like us and we read this and we're like, wow, look at God in every situation, every scenario. Because we're looking at the way King Herod ruled, to think about the struggles and having to leave, and then the 6 months of having a child, you know, for Joseph and Mary to struggle with, you know, we weren't even married yet, and now she's with child, you know. Back then, you don't get married to people like that. And just like, imagine the different things that were going on.
Yeah, I think I like what you said a lot about, you know, as long as we're willing. They use the phrase a lot of, I'm fulfilling the prophecy, or I am saying this to fulfill what has been said, or I'm doing this to fulfill what has been spoken. And I think it's so important to know that we have been given free will, but if we can follow and constantly be in tune with what we feel God is speaking into our lives, then we're fulfilling His will. And I think that can be a call to action for us of, you know, just like little teenager Jesus, or preteen Jesus, when he wasn't following along with his family, he was fulfilling what God was needing him to do. And so I think we can fulfill prophecy, or we can fulfill His will, as long as we're continually in tune and having that relationship with Christ. So I think that kind of wraps it up for today. I hope that you guys have some questions on these readings. We would really love to answer them and dive in together. And guess what? We're not going to know all the questions, but that's how we sharpen each other, is to ask questions freely, with love and guidance. And we have the whole map. I'm going to keep referring to it as that. We have the whole map right here that we're going to dive in together.
And we'll search for it.
Yes, and we're going to continue to train our spiritual temples. So I hope to see you next time. If you want to read along with us, make sure that you follow our live video. We don't have a set schedule yet, but it will be every other day, hopefully around the same time. And then we will get together again for another Bible study.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Be blessed.
Bye-bye.